everyone. Our topic is suicide rate analyzed with ARCO, and our group number is Wu Yu, Xin Yintang, Yu Yuxin, and Wang Zhenzhen. So you may be curious about why we choose this topic. Actually, with the development of society and increasing of people's life, psychological problems are affecting our health. So according to the National Institution of Mental Health, suicide was the 10th leading cause of death in the US and was killing nearly 45,000 people in 2006. So therefore, our purpose of the project is to develop the relationship between suicide rate and demographic or economic feature among the countries. And in order to invoke the importance of mental health, we aim to develop a model for future prediction of suicide rate and find out the suicide high-risk groups for policymakers to better control suicide rate. So actually the data was built to find factors correlated to increased suicide rate among one or more countries in the past 30 years. And it provides us a way to view deeply the suicide rate from different perspectives like countries, year, sex, age, and like populations. So here we have a spectral variable which is suicide per 100K. Is it calculated based on year, age, sex, and country? However, in the following analysis, we need to use suicide rates based on only 2 or 3 dimensions. So we add a column called suicide rates. So this is the detail of our questions and hypotheses. So let's move to Wu Yu to talk about the observation of our project.
Hi everyone, I'm Yu Wu, and now I'm going to talk about some preliminary observations demonstrated from the graph. And firstly, let's see the relationship between the suicide rate and age. And in this graph, different colors represent different age group, and the y-axis will represent the suicide rate. And from this graph, we can see that the older the age group, the higher the position, the higher the suicide rate. And moreover, people over 75 years old have the highest suicide rate. And now, let's see the relationship between the suicide rate and the gender. And the left side is the information for female, and the right side is the information for male. And from this graph, we can see that for each age group, the suicide rate for the position for each age group for male is always higher than the position of the age group for the female. So, which means that male always has the highest suicide rates. This is understandable because male have more pressure on its life and work. And then let's see which year has this highest suicide rate worldwide. And from the graph, we can see that around 1990s, the suicide rate reaches the peak. So why in 1990s? So now let's analyze the macro environment first. Actually, a lot of financial crisis happens around 1990s, such as the Mexican financial crisis and Asian financial crisis. So worse macro economy will lead to worse living condition, and people will have lots more pressure, which will lead them to suicide. And next, let's see, do developed countries have higher suicide rate? First, let's see some observations in 1995 and 2006. And from this table, we can see that the majority of the countries which have the highest suicide rate are all from Europe, and most of them are the developed countries. As a result, developed countries does have higher suicide rates. And this is also understandable because in the developing countries, they have poor living condition. And the causes of their deaths are mainly due to like disease, hunger, or war. And for the developed countries, their living condition is better, and the causes of their deaths are mainly because of mental problems or like other reasons. For example, like the Switzerland, they legalized the euthanasia very early in 1941, and the suicide rate in Switzerland is almost the highest around all countries. And finally, let's see the relationship between the GDP per capita and the suicide rate in several representative countries. And we choose one country from each continent. This is the graph for US, and this is the graph for UK. And graph, we can see that both US and UK follows a downward trend. And this is the graph for Japan. This is graph for the Australia. And for both Japan and Australia, they also follows a downward trend. However, this is the graph for the South Africa. And in this graph, we can see that South Africa follows an upward trend. So generally speaking, the relationship between the GDP per capita and suicide rate may positive or may negative in each country. And next, we want to construct a linear regression model to see the general relationship between the GDP per capita and suicide rate from the worldwide perspective. And now let's welcome Yuxin Yu to talk about the linear regression model.
So let's run the linear regression. So first, we have numeric variables, this one, and we run the correlation, and we found that the HDI has a high correlationship with GDP, which is here. So we decided to remove the HDI because it has highly correlation, and also it has lots of NA. And then we choose to use GDP per capita to replace GDP for year and population, because when we think about economic situation, we should not only think about the GDP but also the population. And the GDP per capita includes these two effects. And then it's the suicide per 100K. As we mentioned before, suicide per 100K is calculated based on age, sex, and year. In order to run the linear regression using the GDP per capita, which is calculated on only country and year, so we should calculate another suicide rate based on only country and year. Third, we create a new data frame including suicide rate for each country and each year as new dependent variable, and GDP per capita as input. So let's see the result. You can see that here we have small p-value. This means that the GDP per capita has significant effect on the suicide rate. However, here we also have the adjusted R-square, which is very small. This one tells us that changes caused by GDP per capita does not explain the variability we observe in suicide rates. Perhaps there are better variables in the data that explain the suicide rates better, like demographic features, which we will discuss in a few minutes. The final step is to evaluate the fitness of our model deriving from training data. We calculate the R-squared, and here is very small, so actually our model is not quite fit for our test data. So let's welcome Zhenzhen Wang to talk about the next linear regression model.
According to our data, GDP per capita is not calculated by age and sex, so we cannot add sex and age into our previous model. So we now run the linear regression, use only age and sex as predictors to predict the suicides per 100,000. As the step we did before, we also divide the data into training and test. And here is the regression result of this model. As the result shown here, we can see the p-value is for all predictors are practically small, which means that all predictors have a significant effect on the output. However, if we see the adjusted R-square here, it's quite low, about 0.297. The reason for this is that our data have limited predictors, and we cannot add any other predictors to improve the accuracy of our model. In conclusion, economic and demographic factors do contribute to suicide rate, but due to the limited predictors in our data, the models are weak with low R-square. In order to improve the accuracy of the model, there are many other factors to include, whether human rights or income disparity, to name a few. Thank you.